So why do we suddenly need a corporate memory? What a gadget. Well, we've gotten used to a way of working that was really annoying. But still, we just knew that that was how it was, and we've tried to solve the problem for 3 or 4 decades. It's just the way it is. Well, not anymore. And that's the purpose of the corporate memory. Let's get back to that. You see, what normally happens is that there are a lot of stakeholders involved in product development. All of those stakeholders you see around here. Each are essentially talking about the same thing, but they're not saying the same. It's not the same information that they are providing. They all, however, expect that exactly their version of this information is correct. And by the way, that all of the other stakeholders have understood them, so that they also agree that this is correct. However, they also think, should there be any deviations in this information, it will be fixed at a low cost along the way. But it's not like that. But the way we have handled it has led to something we call normal problems. We have learned to know as normal problems because we didn't have a really good way of handling it. All those small misunderstandings along the way were the problem. They did, however, require a lot of communication, each of them, and they created not much rework, but surprisingly much rework. Because this redundant and outdated information led to 2 things that was bad: uncertainty and annoyance. Uncertainty because you could not be sure if you had the correct information, which is not a very nice foundation to work on. And when you realize that it was wrong, it was way too late. You had already been taking decisions and making designs based on wrong assumptions. And that is really annoying. The time you spend looking for the correct information is annoying. Definitely the rework that you have to do because you did some design decision, took some design decisions based on assumption that later proved to be wrong. That is annoying. What is even more annoying is the time you spend fixing, reworking stuff that you have done based on assumptions that someone else had the right information, but it turned out that it was wrong, and then they had to change their design, and then you have to change your design, and that is really annoying. But it has been the normal thing, so we kind of gotten comfortably, not the right word, but somewhat used to it. Trying to build something solid on a not very solid foundation. Let's see if we can look for a new normal for that matter. That's a corporate memory. And the whole idea here is that we are kind of working on the same topics. That requires, of course, because this is now a common language, that each of those stakeholders spend a little more time on the communication. They invest more time in this communication because they have to kind of translate it to what is natural language to them into something a little more formal of some kind. And that's probably a new thing for most of the stakeholders. But that's kind of the way that we are acquiring a common language, or in this case, corporate memory, where we're actually storing this in a common language. It's an investment, but every stakeholder will very fast appreciate the value of this common understanding, of being understood. And the business improvements will also be significant. So there will be a lot of benefits coming from there as well. Let's take a quick analogy to an old hardware store. That's the one on the picture right here. Picture a situation where a customer is calling and would like to buy a special hammer of some kind. Well, the office clerk who's answering the phone will then call Irvin, who is supposed to know. Irvin, he's sitting in the lunchroom next door and he just replies that there's one left. However, Elisa just sold it. So, well, if none is available, then we definitely have to talk to Irvin, and Irvin will have to tell us if any new hammers are ordered, and he will then call the supplier to check the status of the delivery, and you get the picture. This was not so long ago. Today, it's much smarter. Today, in some kind of development office, we have kind of the same situation, because when a phone rings and a customer would like to have a new functionality in the system, the customer rep will then call Irvin, there he was again, who is supposed to know. He's still sitting in the lunchroom, and he replies that should be easy to implement. No problem, we can do that. That's all the customer needs to know, and the customer is now expecting to have this new functionality as soon as possible. However, Elisa just changed the functionality that this new functionality was kind of dependent on due to some request from marketing. And unfortunately, that little change had an impact on performance. So now the systems people are pretty much alert. And then you get the picture. That's today. So if you use the analogy and think that the corporate memory is for development department, pretty much as what a top-notch inventory system is for a hardware shop, right? It brings order to everything, order that we can use and which is creating a lot of performance. It allows fast decisions to happen. It increases the performance to the benefit of all, right? However, it is a pain in the neck to implement. Let's face it. It's not funny. It's tough work. We have to go through a lot of the stuff that we have of legacy systems and inventory and everything, and have to add it into this system. But once it's there, no one's looking back. No one. If you're one of the many who enjoys a well-tuned DevOps environment, you learn to appreciate all the benefit that comes out of the ability to deploy very fast. A corporate memory is quite the same thing, applying the same control to the input level of the whole development process. The benefit of a DevOps system is based on a strong automated tool support to a solid structure of code elements under strict configuration control. Ooh. Just to remind you, there was a lot of words here that isn't exactly including a lot of sex appeal. Something like strong automated tool, structure, strict configuration control. Not exactly sexy word, but when it comes together to support you in your daily life, it's really worth everything. Keep that in mind, because it's the same thing that we are going after here. However, before we are entering into the DevOps arena, all the design input, all the requirements, all the needs, all the constraints and everything else is kind of floating around in various documents, in key persons' minds. Maybe there is some partial requirement management system that covers some areas. Maybe there are some input that are regulated for some reasons and are in better shape than others. But compared to the control you have over the code, it's a mess. A corporate memory is applied control of all input requirement, everything that goes into the DevOps arena. And you would love to have these things integrated as close and smoothly as possible. The best thing is if you can store all that input information inside your DevOps system in the same tool stack. That's the coolest thing on earth. Go for it. That means that you, as a developer with a corporate memory, you will know which design decision made by which stakeholder had led to the task that you're working on. You would know which requirements the task is supposed to implement. You would know which needs those requirements are actually supporting. You should know which test cases are included, and you would fairly easy get an overview of all the stakeholders involved who may be interested in your design and implementation decisions. In fact, all the best information that is known at that point in time, you will have it, and that is enabling you to do your best. That's what we're looking for here, whatever it looks like. So to wrap up here, this is all about avoiding misunderstandings in the early creative phases. Whereas the industry as a whole right now has much more control over the late creative phases in the construction phase, the early phases are not that well structured, not that well managed. So we need a corporate memory to manage and facilitate this information, which is shared between so many stakeholders in a very complex environment. However, the industry has lacked a proper tool to support and to handle this information. So we ended up with word-based requirement specification and some Excel-based traceability matrix and all that. It never ever worked well, but it was all we had. So eventually we ended up in this situation with hundreds of pages of requirement specifications that was misused to take the customers, the users, as hostages in the expectation setting environment, in the contract, whatever. And it never ever met the idea of being a communicative, informative document to communicate from the need of an end user to the construction in the end. But time has changed. Technology now opens up for a corporate memory. And first thing you should consider very carefully, would that be nice to have?